Hi everyone, on this video I'll be giving a brief analysis on the upcoming 6-man event where there will be 2 banners, and I'll start off with the banner featuring the Emperor, Balthier and Pain because this is a more straightforward banner. This banner is a so-called rerun banner because every single weapon on this banner, including the Emperor's LD and burst weapon, have been released before in the GL version of the game. So starting a look at the Emperor to begin. The Emperor is a magic DPS character that specializes in damage through traps. His S1, S2 and EX can all inflict traps, and his EX notably inflicts all his traps except for his unique trap from his burst weapon. His LD, once used, will trigger all active traps on the enemies, and his LD also converts his HP attack into HP+++. On his turn, when you use HP+++, it will also trigger all active traps on the enemies as well, and that's really his main source of damage in the game. With this event, the most notable change that I can see is that his traps now will have multiple HP dumps, and his EX is now also instant turn. So essentially you now can go EX to apply all his traps, he gets an instant turn, and you can then go LD into HP+++ and continuously trigger all his traps. His biggest drawback is that his damage is very reliant on his traps, so his DPS will plummet significantly if the bosses has the ability to cleanse their debuffs. The other thing about him is that he requires quite a number of debuff slots on the enemies, and his traps each take a single framed debuff but doesn't actually do much beyond providing the trap damage. I believe each trap only carries a 10% defense down stat modifier. His burst weapon does provide a 1-turn unique trap that's different from all his other traps, and that trap will also delay all enemies' turn by 2 turns when triggered. However, as far as I know, his LD and HP+++ will not trigger his BT trap, so that trap activates the conventional way after the enemies take their turn. Next up, we have Balthier. Balthier functions as sort of like a support aura bot, but he also has the added utility of being able to steal enemies' buffs, as well as cleanse all allies' debuffs through his LD. The other thing that's different about him is that his support auras are not tied to any buffs, but is instead tied to his stacking overhead mechanic. And when his overhead reaches 5 stacks, and it increases by 1 stack every time he gets a turn, he reaches full potency of his support auras. And the cool thing about his support auras being tied to an overhead is that technically if the bosses can dispel your buffs, Balthier actually won't be affected that much since an overhead is separate from a buff. Unfortunately though, Balthier's support auras aren't really the strongest, especially in the current meta where we have access to top quality BT support aura bots. He also isn't the strongest in the DPS department, even comparing to a few other support characters in the game. Therefore, his main use is usually in situations where his other utilities in buff stealing or debuff cleansing will come in handy. In terms of value on this banner, I think overall this banner is probably very skippable. I think the Emperor is really one of those DPS characters that you really only use if you actually like using him, or you like having a character that has quite a number of traps in their kit. Even at optimal conditions where he's fully supported by auras and all his traps are in play and he can trigger all his traps, his damage is pretty good then, but so are a few other top tier DPS units. And the problem, in my opinion, is that for the Emperor, you need to have several different conditions going on in order to hit his best damage, which is you need to have all his traps up, and you need to have the enemies not cleansing or removing any of his traps, and you need to build a party that doesn't inflict too many debuffs so that there'll be enough space for his traps to land. Balthier also at this stage of the game, sadly, I feel is not really a prize. If you really want good support characters, there are many other options. And if you do need utility in terms of buff dispelling or debuff cleansing, there are also other options even as core abilities in this stage of the game. This brings us to the second banner on this event, which I guess is the more hyped banner. This banner features Snow with a rerun of his LD and his burst weapon newly released, and Lyse with her LD weapon newly released as well. So I'll start off with Snow. In this game, Snow functions primarily as a tank character. He has a framed buff on himself that has stacks, and at maximum stacks will provide a 100% brave damage reduction and significant HP damage reduction as well. He can inflict the lock-on debuff with his Steel Guard and his EX ability. His LD, which was released before, helps supplement his damage by providing him a preemptive strike every time he gets a turn. And with this banner event, he actually gets a rework on his LD, and his preemptive strike will actually increase in potency and hit harder, alongside with his LD skill as well. His burst weapon, which was newly released, provides the entire party with a few common offensive auras, but the notable thing about his burst weapon is that firstly, it also provides the party with Ice Enchant, which is pretty good because he himself imperils the ice element. In addition, his burst aura does have a very unique component, which is anytime a party member lands an HP dump, the party member also gets an additional 50% refund in Brave. Keeping in mind that this is per HP dump, not per HP attack. So for example, if a character has multiple HP dumps, say for example Machina with his HP burst attack, every single HP dump results in him getting a 50% Brave refund before his next HP dump. And this actually translates to a huge increase in damage, especially for certain characters that do not have any Brave refund in their kit. Furthermore, this Brave refund is affected by plus Brave gain effects, for example with characters such as Y'shtola, and by stacking Brave gain up effects with Snow's BT aura, you can actually deal some insane numbers on characters with multiple HP dump attacks. There's nothing really bad about Snow. Overall, I think he's a pretty solid character. The only thing, of course, as if all BT characters recently released, if you want to get the most out of Snow, you have to be prepared to invest BT ingots in him so that you can get his BT plus attack. Keep in mind also that Snow is primarily a tank character, so he isn't a character himself that is designed to deal a lot of damage. But overall, if you are on the lookout for a tank character to supplement your roster, Snow is actually a pretty decent choice. Next up is Lyse, and she's primarily a physical DPS character. I actually think that Lyse is pretty solid for an LD only DPS character. I've always had a soft spot for Lyse. In fact, when she was first released in the GL version of the game, I did give her a 3/3 EX and used her in Dimensions and Entropy way back then. Her S1 and S2 does get a tuning pass as well, which considerably boosts up her damage, and she hits actually decently hard given the fact that she doesn't even have a BT weapon. The notable thing about her update on this event is that they really increase her longevity in fights. First of all, her Riddle of Fire will now no longer consume a skill when you use it. In addition, when you use her Purification, for 2 turns after that she will no longer consume skill counts when you use her abilities, and she also gets a bonus 40% HP damage up for those 2 turns. Her LD, which is newly released, gives her a new LD buff that both increases the HP and Brave damage done by your party members and reduce the Brave and HP damage taken from your party members as well. Overall, I think the value on this banner is a bit more dependent on what sort of characters you really need to fill up the gaps in your roster. There's been a lot of talk surrounding Snow and his burst weapon, but I really think that you have to keep in mind that Snow was and is always going to be primarily a tank character. So if you really feel that you need a tank character, then by all means pull for Snow. But if you don't really feel the need to pull for more tank characters, or your playstyle doesn't really require a tank in the first place, then I think Snow has relatively less value in those situations. The same goes for Lyse as well. She actually does decently well overall as an LD only unit, and whether or not you really should pull for her, I think really depends on whether you need more LD only damage dealers in your party. For newer players, I guess this banner holds much more value because tank characters are not very common, and I believe the last one that came up was Zac, and that was I guess some time ago. And for newer players, of course, you probably wouldn't have that many DPS characters built up, and in that case, Lyse is certainly a very solid choice. For players who have been playing for some time though, the value is less clear. For example, if you already picked up Zac and you've greened him, then you probably won't need another tank character. Of course, with Snow's BT Aura having that unique component of that 50% Brave refund, you could potentially pull for him and build a party that specializes in Brave gains in order to maximize the aura. But keep in mind that although that works, it does require a very specific party setup, so you do need to consider who else can you bring that will increase the Brave gains for your party if you want to do that. So that's all for this video. As always, I hope the video has been helpful, and if you like the content, please leave a like, comment or subscribe. It really helps a lot. Till then, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!